Hello, everybody, and welcome. This is the business development class recorded January 16th, 2019. And I guess what I'd like to say is I actually recorded this class, the actual class discussion, and I was thinking about posting it as is because I did get permission from the members to post it, but then I felt like it would just be better to have a standard practice of posting a summary of the class instead of um, posting people's actual discussion just for confidentiality purposes, just to protect people's privacy. So, but the good thing is because I recorded it, I was able to listen to it again, and that is going to help me summarize it more effectively and more thoroughly. So here is what we did. So as always on these calls, I'm going to start by sending you an email a few days before. And in this particular case, nobody responded to the email before the class. So I was sort of left with having to improvise. And so when that happens, because I realize that people are busy, and so I'm going to basically create the class based on whatever comes to me. So in this case, I had no prior information from any of you about any of your specific issues. And so what I did is I just did an initial round robin, and I asked everybody, what is my most important sales issue and what is the most important thing that I would love to hear from others on the call, and anything that I could learn that would be most useful to me. So what I ended up doing is develop a conversation circle from this. And because we had 3 people, and then including myself 4, on the call, we were able to actually dive into each person's issue and go around and get them some feedback from based on what was in all of our heads. So this conversation, at first I was a little bit worried because we all are in such different positions in our businesses and we have different problems. But even with the number of people that we had on the call, it was still a very rich discussion. However, I would like to encourage those of you who are on this call listening to this particular recording to join the call live whenever you can, because the experience that you get from actually being in the discussion is incredibly rich, and I can't replicate it just by giving you a summary. So the summaries are good for the calls that you have to miss. I understand that everyone's busy, but if you can try to attend at least 2 calls and participate in the discussions per week, particularly this one on business development, because the issues are so focused and so rich, and they really, really help us all get a broader strategic perspective on business development. All right, so what I'd like to do is basically talk about the 3 main issues that were brought up. So we had talked about the book, The Challenger Sale, and most of the people on the call have either read that book or are actually actively putting it into practice. So one of the participants talked about how they have a global company, and they actually work very closely with the people from the Challenger Sale organization, and we're told that the way that the delivery methodology that they use in the book works very well in the U.S. and also in Great Britain, but does not work as effectively in other countries and other regions around the world. So her question was to others, what were their experiences? And the bullets here on this slide summarize the main points of what people shared. So what they agreed with is the most important part of that book is generating an aha moment for the buyer and using that principle of providing that unique value that changes how they think about their issues. Use that as a core and then adapt your delivery system to the culture. And so there was a lot of discussion about how all the companies, when they're operating globally, tend to get partners, develop partnerships within the companies to help them with the local culture. If you have friends in local companies, sometimes you can get some guidelines and learn how to operate in that particular culture and be kind of a quick study on the culture. And also in many cultures, it's offensive to talk about business as soon into a relationship as it would be appropriate in the United States. So while we might spend a few minutes building a relationship and then launch into a business conversation, you know, it might be several days of relationship building before you can begin to talk business in other cultures. So that was kind of the main summary. It was a very rich discussion. Again, I can't really replicate it here, but these are some of the main points that came out of it. We had a second issue that was about structuring sales teams, including compensation, especially in a collaborative sales team where multiple people might be involved in pulling together a deal. And again, there was a nice, rich discussion about how sales organizations deal with the fact that some of the customers are very complex and some of the customers are more simple, and how to divide up account management versus long-term customer care versus upselling within accounts. And so here are some of the things that came out of that part of the discussion. Someone had mentioned that they've seen some organizations that they've been in just divided everything up straight territorial or straight by region. But then they also had something where, you know, the top enterprise customers kind of had a different sales team, maybe elite sales team, because it took a higher skill level to manage the sales in some of these bigger companies. And so you might have a sales team that manages smaller companies and a sales team that manages bigger target clients. Also, just a warning that if you have different people responsible for upselling within an account and managing an account, that could create all sorts of havoc. So a warning not to do that. A note that a person has observed that most of the time when sales get lost, it can be during the onboarding and handoff phase. So you can kind of close a sale, but then bring somebody on board, and a lot can happen during that phase. So in some situations, continuity through the whole process is critical, and it's important to have the same person involved in all of that. But then there was also a note that if the reps that are responsible for getting new business get too caught up in account management, then they stop the hunting part of their business. And so we really have to think about who do we want out there hunting and who do we want dealing with the onboarding. And sometimes that requires a lot of thought. Sometimes it takes a tribe to close the deal, and so the salesperson ends up just being more of an orchestrator, bringing in high-level execs or technical expertise to bring it all together. So again, a lot of sales are complex, and it may require something different from just a straight compensation system. Two important things to keep in mind is you want to keep the hunters hungry enough to want to keep hunting, but when it comes to compensation, you want to have a clear line of demarcation, who gets what. So if you have someone else who's teamed up with the hunter, who's going to be doing more account developing, and they both get compensation or bonus based on that client, you want to make sure it's very clear who gets what and when. Let's see. Another comment that was made is sometimes you can have a team that includes a hunter and a farmer, and they work hand in hand. So the hunter's always connected to the accounts, and so is the farmer, and that makes it more seamless. But the farmer spends more time on the account once it's onboarded, and the hunter spends a lot less time with active accounts, more being someone who drops in from time to time, maintains the relationship, but doesn't handle a lot of the administration or a lot of the day-to-day issues, and that can keep the hunter out there continuing to hunt while the farmer is working more on developmental business. And I don't know exactly how the compensation is structured there, but usually they're both getting compensated for those accounts. So that was that issue. And then we had a third issue that came up, and that is with a company that had been set up to do B2B or business-to-business selling. So selling a product into businesses that would then provide that product to all of their, it's software for research scientists. So to provide software to their research team and realizing that they also need to target consumers. So how do we quickly move or add that business to consumer arm to our marketing efforts? And let's see, some of the main points that came up in that discussion was, first we had a little bit of discussion trying to kind of define who the end user was. And usually it looks like in this particular case it was a scientist or researcher who was somewhat independent. So they're not kind of in a university or a pharmaceutical company. They're separate enough, so they're probably buying their tools on their own. And we talked about where to advertise, what organizations might serve that person. We talked about kind of figuring out what the why is. So why would they want to own their own license for the software product? And do you have maybe a different level with lower pricing that's more affordable for independent end users, such as an Intuit, how they'll have a free version for individuals to use, but then they'll also be selling much more complex versions to accounting firms. So we brainstormed on where would scientists and researchers hang out to either learn or to buy equipment, to buy research equipment, and maybe you can partner with those kinds of organizations. So that was our third conversation. And then we had some more general conversation as we closed off the class. One thing that we discussed was a topic that we missed, which we had talked about kind of developing a scorecard for what makes a good rep or how to hire salespeople. And I think even to the people that aren't on the call, I think some of you are going to be in the process of hiring salespeople, and that's really important to you. Other thoughts that were discussed is, what kind of a class do we want this to be? Do we want this to be something where we have topics planned in advance that we're going to discuss, or do we want to do more improvisation, which is what we did on this class, which is what are the issues that you're dealing with, and let's get some brain power on the issues. And I think what was decided is we like a hybrid model, and that means that we do like to go around and brainstorm on the issues, but everybody agreed that it would really help if there was a little bit of planning involved. In other words, if I send out some questions in advance of the class and people can send in what the issues are or what the things are they'd like to hear from other people, then you can get an email on that 2 or 3 days before class and you can think about it. And then you can be more prepared to share. I think one of the things that I noticed on this call is a question would come up and a lot of us would feel like we were searching for answers when the question came up. But if we had had more time to think about it, we might have been able to think about many more resources or come up with many more ideas, and it could have been even more rich conversation. So what we're going to be doing moving forward is I'm going to try to send out the questions maybe even the prior week for some of these calls and just give you guys some time to think about what you want to get out of the call and write it in. And then if we do use that app Slack, there'll be a discussion group just for this class, and we can share issues and even brainstorm together in that particular communication forum. But that will give us a lot of, I guess, information before we get on the call so that we can be well prepared to share ideas. I think also we can say, hey, let's dive into this chapter of this book and discuss it because it's really relevant to something that's important to quite a few of us, and we can do that in advance too. And we have a whole reading list, and there may be other books that we haven't touched on yet that are also really valuable. But those are things that we can do in communication with each other in the time between classes. So I think that's important too. So my commitment is to continuously improve the format, make it valuable for everybody. But I would say the two things that you can do that will really make this a powerful class for you and everybody else is, number one, when you get some questions from me in an email before the class, try your best to spend a few minutes, even if it's only a few minutes, answering the questions so that we have ideas of what is relevant to people, and we can plan a class around those things. And then the second thing is, if at all possible, show up on the calls, because the more people that show up on the calls, the richer the discussion will be and the more perspectives that you're going to have. And also, if you just listen to the recording, you are going to get sort of the gist of what was talked about, but you're not going to get the exact same richness as if you participated in the discussion itself. You're not going to actually be connecting with people. These calls in January have been sort of the beginning of this program, and so I'm tweaking and tweaking and tweaking and improving. They're going to just get better and better and better. So I highly encourage you to join whenever you can, and I think it'll be well worth your time. So thanks for listening, and I look forward to hearing you next time.